A lifeless silence blankets the mountains. The air cuts deeper than a blade, and the snow is not white but blue, the color of suffocation. Beneath that shimmering frost lies a body, curled, intact, eyes sealed by time itself. Yet somehow it speaks. It whispers of a war not against enemies, but against the atmosphere itself. In this frozen cathedral, every breath was a negotiation with death. Fire was not warmth. It was a fragile rebellion that could collapse in moments. The cold stripped everything, sound, thought, mercy, until the only thing left was instinct. You can almost feel it. Lungs tightening, fingers stiffening, mind flickering between surrender and fury. This was existence reduced to its core equation. Generate heat or perish. Somewhere above those peaks, storms devoured entire generations. Tribes vanished like sparks in endless blizzards, and yet a few endured. They built invisible armor inside their biology, rewired their skin, hacked the laws of thermodynamics long before physics even had a name. They didn't just survive the cold. They absorbed it, transformed it, mastered it, and when the glacier closed over them, their secret didn't die. Century after century, until our drills and satellites disturbed their frozen tombs. Now they return, their faces still carved by the wind, their diets fossilized in bone dust, their DNA screaming a single message across millennia. We adapted. Because this isn't a story about archaeology. Proof that humanity's greatest enemy was never the cold, but the illusion that we were fragile. Imagine esto. You wake to darkness so thick you can feel it pressing against your eyelids. The air is thinner than glass, and every breath you take feels stolen. Your eyelashes are glued together by frost, your pulse drumming in your ears as if trying to remind you that you are still, somehow, alive. The night is not quiet. It is full of whispers from the wind scraping over ice that has claimed thousands before you. Your fingers claw at the ground. It's not snow beneath you. It's bone dust mixed with centuries of frozen skin. Beneath your knees, the ground shifts slightly, hollow as if there were cavities below. There are bodies entombed in permafrost, bodies that once had names, warmth, and heartbeat. You feel a shiver, not because of the cold, but because you realize that their fate is pressing upward through the ground toward you. And yet they survived longer than you ever could. Your modern knowledge betrays you here. You think about building a large fire, about dry wood, about safety. But the truth is merciless. Fire in a cave this small kills you faster than the cold. Smoke fills the chamber, carbon monoxide seeps into your lungs, and you suffocate in your sleep. It's not a campfire scene, it's a tomb. That's the first rule the ice teaches the arrogant. Not everything warm is your friend. The problem with cold is that it doesn't attack. It infiltrates. It moves like water, slipping through seams, stealing the heat one molecule at a time. You feel it crawling beneath your skin, reaching your bones, slowing the chemical storm inside you until even time itself begins to freeze. 5 minutes out here without shelter is pain. 10 minutes is damage. 30 minutes and you are already turning into one of them, the ancient ones who stare upward through transparent coffins. But here's the truth that shatters every Hollywood fantasy. Survival wasn't about brute strength or heroism. It was mathematics. It was engineering disguised as instinct. These ancient humans built protocols, not campfires. They understood convection, insulation, group energy transfer. They were not merely tough. They were calibrated. And when archaeologists found them, sealed in perfect ice, their very posture told the story of precision under pressure. You can still see it in the oldest specimen found high in the Alps, a man now called the Iceman. But imagine for a moment that it's you. Your clothes are not coats from modern stores. They are layers of animal hide stitched with sinew, compressed in a pattern that traps air pockets like a modern down jacket. Each stitch matters. Miss one, and a blister of cold air moves in, targeting vital organs like an assassin. Your survival is a fabric geometry problem. And the boots, they are miracles of desperation turned design. 2 layers, inner grass insulation and outer hide. They look crude, but they are engineered pressure systems that redirect warmth to arterial zones. Modern only understood centuries later what these people knew intuitively. The foot is a furnace that dies first. Lose your feet, lose your tribe. That's not fear, it's physics. The wind outside climbs the slopes like a predator. You hear it changing pitch, signaling incoming collapse of snow above. Avalanches were not accidents back then. They were omens. You and your group must move, but every sound, every vibration could trigger death from the ridges above. So you move slow, synchronized, breathing as one. This was not guesswork. It was choreography carved by survival instinct. Now, let's confront a myth. The myth of independence. Modern man romanticizes the lone survivor, the hero surrounded by endless white, defying through willpower. But that image kills. In this landscape, solitude is suicide. Heat bleeds faster from a single body than from 3 pressed together. Shared breath is insulation. Group huddling is not weakness. It's thermodynamics. Alone, you are a story half told. Imagine the first dawn after a storm. The sun rises, but it gives no relief. It glares coldly upon the terrain, exposing jagged shadows etched into endless white. The cold intensifies with the light because reflection amplifies loss. You squint toward the horizon and see glimmers of movement. Your tribe is already assembling, checking shelters carved from rock and ice slabs. Every calm action masks a silent clock ticking. Eat, move, repair before the next freeze. The discovery of the ice mummies proved one thing. The human body is not fragile clay. It's adaptive architecture. Inside the frozen flesh of these ancestors, scientists found changes in fat composition and microvascular structures that modern humans rarely develop. Brown adipose tissue, active even in adulthood, capillaries near the skin denser than usual. Their biology wasn't accidental evolution. It was training through exposure, generation by generation, rewriting the body's code to outsmart the void. Picture being trapped in a storm that never ends. You can't see 5 steps ahead. The snow burns your eyes, salt crystals forming along your lids. You reach out, guided not by vision, but rhythm, the crunch of footsteps ahead. Each sound tells you your place in the formation. Lose the rhythm, and you vanish. This was not adventure. It was protocol. Discipline was warmth. Structure was survival. Every glacier was a memory bank that swallowed civilizations, yet preserved their errors and triumphs. One mistake, for example, sleeping directly on stone instead of layering dry grass beneath, and the result is instant hypothermia. The ground steals heat faster than air. Your ancestors knew that. They built mats of animal hair, compact insulation cushions that today's scientists study like blueprints. Every solution they designed carried the weight of life and death. There was no guesswork, only iteration through extinction. That's the crux of this frozen world. The body was just the surface tool. The real weapon was intelligence sharpened by repetition. You may feel superior with your synthetic clothes and GPS trackers, but strip those away, and you would not last half a night here. The difference between them and you is not evolution. It's memory. They remembered what the wind could do. You forgot. By the time modern archaeologists uncovered their remains, frozen in postures of effort, not defeat, the evidence was irrefutable. They were builders of survival, not victims of climate. Their organs, still intact in ice, told a story of systems optimized for cold exposure. Stomach contents revealed proteins high in fat and slow-burning energy sources. Metabolic engineering centuries before nutrition. You can mock the primitive until you see that your body gives up faster than theirs ever did. Look closely at the frost glazing their faces. This is not the expression of terror. It is focus. Some eyes half open, as if eternally scanning horizons that we no longer can imagine. In those glacial tombs lies the proof that fear was useful only when it propelled action. They did not bow to the cold. They negotiated with it. Every motion, breath, and heartbeat was a clause in that unspoken contract. As you imagine that ancient world, your own body begins to betray you. You shiver even in comfort, because a deeper memory stirs inside your ancestral hardware. Somewhere in your genome, instructions remain. How to generate more heat, how to constrict vessels, how to survive the impossible. You were built by ice. You just forgot the language it speaks. There's a strange serenity in realizing that cold is not an enemy. It is a teacher. 5,000 years buried, and still those mummies are speaking to us. Their silence is louder than any word. It tells you what soft living has erased. Comfort kills adaptation. Warmth without cost breeds weakness. The ice didn't destroy humanity. It refined it. And if you listen closely, somewhere between the crunch of ancient snow and the moan of wind over frozen stone, you can almost hear them. The pulse of those who decoded the art of staying alive when the world wanted them gone. The ones who outlasted extinction not through miracle, but through mathematics, design, and collective will. The ones who looked at the abyss and understood one thing: adapt or die. Imagina esto. You are standing in snow that reaches your knees, the sky a sheet of metal pressing down upon you. The cold doesn't move anymore. It has become stillness. Wait. Your eyelashes are frozen spikes, your breath a ghost that dies before it reaches your shoulder. In the distance, something glints, a fragment of ice shaped like a blade, and it feels like it's pointing directly at you. Your body trembles, not from fear, but from biology screaming a single truth. You are minutes away from shutting down. What you were taught about cold will kill you. The movies lied, the survival guides lied, even your instincts lied. Firelight cannot save you if your body is radiating heat into the air faster than it can produce it. Movement cannot save you if it shatters the last fragile rhythm holding your core together. You don't fight the cold by defiance. You negotiate with it by design. There were 4 laws that separated the living from the statues. Not commandments carved into stone, but physics etched into flesh. The first, contain your heat. The second, distribute your effort. The third, align your energy with the group. The fourth, trust the environment only when you understand it. Break one and the ice doesn't forgive. It rewrites your anatomy in stillness forever. First law, contain your heat. You are not a person anymore. You are a leaking furnace. Your blood is the only liquid that refuses to freeze, but it pays for that stubbornness in loss. Every exposed inch of skin bleeds warmth into the air, invisible but measurable. The ancients knew this without instruments. When they built clothing, it wasn't fashion. It was thermodynamics stitched in fur. Layer upon layer created a trap for air. Not tight, not open, precisely balanced. Between hide and skin, they captured small chambers of insulation, microclimates of survival. The secret wasn't to feel warm. It was to stop losing heat faster than you could make it. What appears primitive is actually calibration. They weren't dressing. They were engineering. Then comes the second law. Distribute your effort. Every modern instinct tells you to run, to move, to keep blood flowing. Hollywood made you believe motion equals survival, but motion without discipline burns your reserves, depletes your glycogen, and strangles your muscles with fatigue toxins. The cold doesn't need to attack. You hand it the knife yourself. The tribes discovered patterns instead. 10 steps, pause, exhale through cloth. 10 breaths, resume, synchronize with the heartbeat of the one beside you. Each movement calculated not by distance, but by energy spent. It was not speed, it was efficiency. This is why they lasted when predators didn't. Their pace was tactical silence measured in metabolism. Now the third law. Align your energy with the group. You think survival means solitude because every story told you so. But your single heartbeat is weak currency in a frozen economy. The group is a combustion engine where every pulse adds to the next. Heat multiplies, not by magic, but by proximity. Flesh pressed to flesh, synchronized exhalation creating a shared membrane of warmth. They learn to sleep not alone, but locked tight, forming clusters shaped like coils. One rotates out, another moves to the center. The cold always attacks the outer layer first. The system isn't compassion, it's computation. Miscalculate rotations and you doom the whole cluster to exhaustion. In those blizzards, cooperation wasn't friendship. It was the geometry of endurance. And now the fourth law. Trust the environment only when you understand it. What glitters on the mountain can be death disguised as beauty. White landscapes lie. They mask voids and thin ice with perfection so flawless it erases depth. You take one wrong step and a crevasse opens like an ancient mouth swallowing centuries. Everything here looks identical until you die. The ice mummies knew. Their routes weren't improvised. They mapped by memory, by smell, by sound. The crack underfoot, the echo off a stone bluff, the way the wind changes tone when approaching a hollow. They read the land as language. You would call it instinct. It was data. 5,000 winters compressed into intuition so pure it became genetic reflex. Imagine your group standing before a cave mouth. Hesitant. The interior is pitch black, and you feel the temptation of safety. Shelter, you think. But this confidence kills more than storms. Without airflow, the fire suffocates you. Without spacing, carbon dioxide creeps silently, and you never wake. They understood the paradox. The cave saves only when managed. It's not a refuge. It's a machine with strict rules. So they built their fires small, strategic. Low flames, barely blue, enough to melt animal fat candles, but never enough to attract predators or poison the air. The smoke rose through pre-cut vents, holes shaped with bone chisels. Even the act of breathing was engineered. They weren't discovering warmth. They were manufacturing sustainability in hell. You try to imagine making decisions like this while every nerve in your body screams in pain. When fingers have turned to brittle wood, when snot freezes before it falls, when thought itself feels like glass cracking in the skull. Yet they did it, night after night, adjusting shelter walls by instinct, aligning stones to deflect wind vortices. They practiced engineering through agony. Their laboratory was suffering. Let's talk about the myths that would have killed them. The first is the biggest Hollywood lie, that snow is insulation when shaped into igloos. Wrong. Unless the internal humidity is controlled, the walls sweat, freeze, and collapse. The result is suffocation within minutes. Ancient people adjusted the angle of the dome, leaving calculated cracks near the ceiling to vent excess vapor. It wasn't architecture. It was thermodynamics translated into shelter. Another myth: drink melting snow to hydrate. Death in liquid form. Snow consumes internal heat to melt, lowering core temperature with each mouthful. The ancients melted it first in hide packets warmed by body heat, shared between group members. They didn't guess. They measured in survival hours. For them, water was heat currency, not salvation. If you could go back 5 millennia and walk a single day alongside them, you'd see choreography where you expect chaos. Children assigned as heat scouts, women maintaining skin oils with animal fat to prevent evaporation loss, men building small wind walls shaped by the flow of the valley. Every action is scientific discipline disguised as instinct. It wasn't randomness. It was pattern recognition honed by extinction. The brilliance of these people was not brute resistance to, but the ability to code ritual into biology. You would not survive because you've forgotten the rituals that turned cold into obedience. Modern humans fear discomfort as failure. They feared only disorder. To them, pain was feedback, a signal, not punishment. And when you read the signs on their preserved bodies, the calloused hands, the smoked lungs, the layered clothing fused by frost, you realize something terrifying. They didn't fear the cold anymore. They had become part of its physics. Their existence was a partnership, body heat in exchange for vigilance, thought in exchange for metabolism. The ice was not enemy or ally. It was the test itself. Each of the 4 laws still applies today, even if you sleep in heated rooms and wrap yourself in artificial fibers. The laws are written deeper than memory, encoded in the rhythm of blood flow and the instinct to seek closeness in danger. The mummies did not invent them. They revealed them. Every frozen muscle, every sealed eye carries the same unspoken sentence: respect the code, or the code erases you. So when your breath fogs on a winter morning and you feel compelled to zip your jacket, to clench your body, to find warmth, you are hearing echoes of them. Ancient signals buried inside your nervous system whispering commands. Tighten layers. Save energy. Connect. These are not habits. They are the ancestral laws written in the frost of the human genome. Because surviving the cold was never about toughness. It was a conversation between body and universe. The mummies answered that conversation perfectly. Their silence is the sound of law obeyed. The next time the icy wind slashes at your skin, remember this: it's not punishment. It's the oldest teacher on earth reminding you how every human body once learned to live by the math of survival. Imagine esto. You crawl inside a hollow mountain, your breath fogging the air like smoke from a dying fire. The light disappears behind you, swallowed by stone. In the silence, your heartbeat becomes the only sound, drumming against rock walls that glisten with centuries of frozen condensation. Every vibration, every echo, every drop means one thing. Either this cave becomes your fortress or your tomb. The ancients didn't stumble into safety, they built it. The ice mummy's world wasn't chaos. It was precision hidden under layers of snow. What you call survival, they called architecture. The structures they left behind tell a story of intelligence honed by terror. Each shelter wasn't random stone piled for cover. It was deliberate geometry of heat. First came the base, always chosen under natural overhangs. They understood that rock trapped warmth in still air. Flat surfaces reflected body heat. Rough ones absorbed it. The floor was never bare. It was layered with moss, branches, animal hair, and compressed leaves. They created insulation mats generations before engineers gave that concept a name. The walls were not walls. They were thermal shields. Packed snow outside, stone core, hide lining facing inward. Each layer had a measured purpose. The snow reflected radiation inward. The stone provided stability. The hide sealed humidity. It turned a cave into a living lung, breathing warmth in, holding danger out. Every movement of wind outside transformed into a quiet hum within, filtered through ancestral calculus. But even architecture was warfare. The cold wasn't merely temperature, it was invasion. A bad seal between stone and hide could leak life away faster than blood loss. They tied joints with sinew, caulked cracks with frozen fat, and shaped airflow through tunnels pointing east to catch morning heat. Imagine them hunched in silence, eyes glowing red from embers, recalculating their refuge one breath at a time. Then there was fire, not the symbol of comfort, but the engine of death if misused. They never burned wood blindly. Instead, they layered embers under stones, creating radiant heat without flame. Those stones absorbed energy, releasing it slowly through the night. A stable 12-degree buffer stood between you and oblivion. Survival was not about roaring fire. It was controlled combustion. Modern people think of fire as brightness. To them, darkness is danger. But to the ancients, darkness was insulation. Light meant exposure. Exposure meant predators, attention, loss of energy. They designed spaces where the only glow came from reflection off bone and water. Every flicker of light had to justify its warmth. This was architecture guided by scarcity. Inside those sanctuaries, they constructed zones of function. Sleeping chambers deeper than the main entrance, always curved so air recirculated. Cooking was done near exits, allowing gases to escape. Middle chambers stored meat wrapped in frozen moss, primitive refrigeration systems that kept nutrients intact for weeks. Even the smallest shelter operated as a closed-loop biome of survival. Imagine crouching near the rear wall, your hands pressed against cold rock. You feel it radiating faint warmth back at you because your tribe's body heat has been circulating for hours. You smell smoke, leather, fat, breath, a mixture that feels like existence itself. This isn't a home. This is a prototype of civilization. Here, architecture wasn't about beauty. It was about enduring physics. Every tribe evolved its own building code. In the northern valleys, shelters leaned heavily on terrain angle. Structures built slanted to reduce wind force. On the plateaus, they carved low domes sealed with soil, shifting interiors through movable partitions made of hide. In tundras where trees vanished, they turned to bones, the ribs of mammoths forming arches. A cathedral made of extinction, sheltering the stubbornness of life. There were always myths, dangerous ones. The myth that a large shelter equals safety. False. The bigger the space, the harder to heat. Their shelters were intimate, cramped, sometimes no taller than a crouch. The space around you was engineered to embrace your radiation, reflect it, recycle it. Claustrophobia wasn't misery. It was design. Spaciousness was luxury you couldn't afford. Another myth, that the cold outside stayed outside. Wrong. The cold seeped into everything, even your sleep. They understood conduction without naming it. No one slept directly on stone. They built sleeping platforms elevated by bone lattices to stop the earth from stealing heat. They used animal hides as sleeping sacks of genius simplicity. Inner fur for heat, outer layers slick with fat to repel melting frost. Each shelter had a rhythm of life. Enter, seal, share breath. At night, the group synchronized respiration, balancing carbon and oxygen ratios naturally. Would later call it biofeedback. They just called it breathing together. The cave became a living body, a lung, stomach, and heart made of stone and trust. That's not metaphor. That's thermodynamics as religion. They harnessed reflection intuitively. Meltwater pools weren't waste. They were mirrors amplifying light from small candles. A single wick doubled in luminosity through positioning. The way they polished bones and shells was not for vanity, it was for brightness. Every photon stretched further because they demanded extraction from nothing. In that extraction, civilization was born. When storms came, those without structure vanished first. The wind ate them, the snow erased them, the ice preserved them as warnings. You can almost hear the logic whisper in your ear. Space equals survival time. Architecture equals lifespan. You want eternity carved into rock. You build it. You hesitate, and the wind writes your name in frost and forgets it by morning. There's a pattern hidden in all this. The caves mimic lungs. The vents mimic nostrils. The placement of heat stones at the core mimics circulation. Every human structure since then, from temples to skyscrapers, borrows from this geometry of warmth. The ancients were not primitive. They were the first thermal engineers. Without formal math, they designed equilibrium by instinct. Picture what it meant to build in cold so severe that tools crack on impact. Fingers stiffen, breath ices over stone, sinew snaps like twine. Yet they persisted, crafting precision through paralysis. They didn't wait for warmth to return. They forged it from calculation. The mind didn't surrender. It adapted through repetition until movement became programming. You can see their calculations even now, preserved in ice like equations written in ancient carbon. The footprints around their shelters form patterns of rotation, movement based on group dynamics and wind mapping. You realize that architecture for them was never personal. It was collective, a ritual of cooperation hardened into infrastructure. The cold didn't invent community. The need to change space together did. Nothing about their shelters was accidental. The angle of rock roofs matched the sun's midday arc, amplifying rare moments of heat. Entrances aligned east to capture morning rays when temperatures hit their lowest. Shadow management, heat inertia, convection scaling, concepts that today fill textbooks, were ingrained through necessity. Didn't tolerate approximation. Excellence was survival's minimum requirement. Even their tools followed architectural logic. Bone needles fit perfectly into grooves made in stone floors, stored upright to avoid moisture absorption. Simple, yes, but it meant they could repair hides within seconds of damage. Architecture wasn't solid. It was fluid response, an interface between body, material, and weather. They didn't need precision instruments. They became precision tools themselves. And in that transformation lies humanity's true genius. The ancients didn't build to escape. They built to speak its language. Cold demanded obedience, but they negotiated with craft. Their shelters weren't walls between humanity and the void. They were compacts signed in bone and breath. To live meant to design continuously, every minute a recalibration of structure and survival. You sit in your modern home now, heat radiating from metal circuits, walls programmed by invisible thermostats. Yet none of it feels alive the way those stone lungs did. The difference is intimacy. They built with their hands, their hunger, their dead. You build with distance, and that distance is what freezes you, even in warmth. So when archaeologists found the mummies still surrounded by remnants of those shelters, perfect alignments of hide fragments, stone fire pits organized in patterns, they weren't looking at debris. They were looking at blueprints. This was the first school of engineering, the first architecture firm of the species, founded on terror and precision. Every ice mummy is an architect's ghost. The architecture of warmth wasn't just about building walls. It was about building time. Shelters didn't resist the cold. They delayed it, traded human hours for entropy. The structures were temporal contracts. You could forget death for one more night, one more sunrise. That's not mere survival. That's design as defiance. When you see frost lace across your window tonight, imagine it as handwriting, a reminder. The ice spelling a language your ancestors understood in their bones. Architecture was never about protection. It was about prolonging the heartbeat long enough to matter. Every stone they placed was a syllable in the sentence that said, "We refuse to vanish. We build, therefore, we live." Imagina esto. The snow has stopped, but the silence is worse than the blizzard. Around you, the world has become a vast tomb of white, perfect and cruel. Every breath feels like inhaling knives. The horizon offers no shape, no color, no mercy. The cold doesn't just surround you, it judges you. You aren't alone. There are 6 of you, and every face looks like marble sculpted by exhaustion. Your lips have split open from frost, eyes sunken, skin burned by wind, as if fire and ice had made a pact to erase you together. In this place, every human flaw, hesitation, selfishness, pride, is lethal. One wrong decision, one broken rhythm, and the group collapses like ice under pressure. This is not a team. It's an organism. The ancient tribes understood that survival was not individual instinct. It was collective discipline. You breathe together, move together, share silence together. The first law of the group was sacred. No body is alone. Warmth is arithmetic. 6 bodies touching share a blood temperature strong enough to defy 0. Break that chain, and you die faster than you can speak the word separate. In these frozen civilizations, every hand meant something. One gathered fuel, another carved bone, another scanned the horizon for shifting storms. There was no redundancy, no hierarchy, only function. Leadership wasn't spoken. It was vibration. The tribe pulsed like a living heart. Every beat synchronized through trust, necessity, and unspoken fear. Imagine rotating night watches, each person awake for 2 hours, guarding the breath of others. You can't fall asleep because that would break the pact. Sleep was shared currency. Those awake became the fire's keepers, whispering warmth into the dark. The rhythm was never broken. not because of rules, but because failure meant eternal silence. The frozen bodies found in clusters tell you this pattern wasn't myth. It was law enforced by. They invented a social thermodynamics, energy transferred not through cables or machines, but through loyalty and proximity. Even arguments were managed by design. Conflict cost heat, and heat was sacred. Anger was luxury. Words were rationed like food. Cooperation wasn't virtue. It was math written in body temperature. Every gesture had a price. Every breath had a consequence. Now imagine hunger arriving like a slow predator. Food runs low, choices become sharp. The weak become burden, yet the ancient code forbids abandoning anyone alive. Not because of morality, but because of equilibrium. Leave one behind, you fracture the heat network, and the storm eats you next. They carried their dying because stopping meant dividing warmth. The pact was physical, not emotional. You might call it compassion today. Back then, it was calculation. Two carrying one could maintain movement without collapsing heat ratios. They rotated positions every mile, ensuring exhaustion never anchored to the same pair. They transformed empathy into logistics. Survival wasn't kindness. It was precision teamwork at the edge of existence. They practiced unity like religion. Now think of what fear does in isolation. It multiplies. Each mind alone becomes an echo chamber for death. But together, fear diffuses, spreads, transforms into readiness. The tribe functioned like a neural network, where panic was distributed evenly until it no longer ruled anyone. They radiated calm as a weapon, using rhythm and chanting to synchronize pulse rates. This was primitive psychology, ancient behavioral engineering. Cooperation had architecture too. In blinding snow, communication became soundless. Glance codes, breath signals, limb gestures. A single exhale could mean stop. A frozen hand raised halfway could mean danger. Invisibility was safety, and words wasted heat. Their entire language condensed into movement, a grammar written in survival. Linguists today might call it minimalism. For them, it was the only way to stay alive. Even death had protocol. A fallen member wasn't abandoned to wind or wolves. The body became part of the system. Clothing stripped, fat harvested, tools repurposed before burial. Every piece mattered. Nothing belonged to death until it served the living one last time. Morality was utility wrapped in reverence. The blood pact demanded that nothing human ever go to waste. They performed rituals not as comforts, but as recalibration. Music against despair, fire dances against chaos, stories to maintain pattern in the mind. Narrative preserved rhythm, rhythm preserved coordination. Each tale was a reminder coded in myth. Never act alone. If someone strayed outside formation, the punishment wasn't anger, it was exposure. The cold didn't forgive disobedience. You imagine them crossing the ridge at dawn. 6 shadows moving as one. No clear leader, no laggard. Each step measured to stay within the group's heat trail. The smallest gap means air intrusion, turbulence, loss. They became geometry in motion. Triangular formations against wind, circular stalls for recovery. Their movement was language, and their unity was, under the microscope of time, confirms their genius. Stress markers in the mummy's bones show repeated shared lifting, burdens distributed equally across male and female frames. Tool wear patterns reveal communal equipment, not personal property. They built equality not through ideology, but necessity. Hierarchy melted before the glacier's indifference. Survival erased privilege. Firelight wasn't owned. It was rotated in shifts, so nobody's body bore the same exposure burden for too long. Psychological resilience grew out of shared deprivation. They discovered something civilization now forgets. Fairness isn't moral. It's practical. The cold enforces justice faster than any law. In the ice, selfishness is suicide. Their blood pact extended beyond warmth. Food sharing followed almost mathematical patterns. 1/3 for elders, 1/3 for carriers, 1/3 for defense. Deviations punished by wind itself. The balance of hunger was sacred because imbalance killed coordination. The tribe became a single digestive system, converting death into days, despair into motion, exhaustion into design. Night falls again. Frost creeps like smoke through cracks in the hides. You sit shoulder to shoulder, breathing each other's air, listening for the groan of shifting glaciers. There's no conversation, only the synchronized sound of inhalation. In that rhythm lies something divine, something we've forgotten. Humanity's original prayer wasn't to gods. It was to one another. Somewhere deep inside those bodies trapped in ice, traces of oxytocin still mark their bloodstreams. Proof that cooperation wasn't learned. It was encoded. Warmth released chemicals of unity. Unity triggered warmth. Every hug, every shared breath, every synchronized heartbeat was evolutionary technology. The blood pact wasn't metaphor. It was physiology sculpted by extinction. And yet, cooperation wasn't always peaceful. When food failed and storms returned two in sequence, desperation tested the code. Some groups fractured, their remains scattered far apart. But those who endured had evolved ritual penalties, symbolic exile before decay. Betrayal carried weight greater than death. They knew the price of breaking math written in blood. At sunrise, they began again, rotating loads, balancing steps, whispering through layers of fur. Their rhythm synchronized even breathing with movement. Scientists today call it efficiency. They would call it remembering. Every motion reaffirmed the contract. We live by collective purpose or we vanish as dust on the glacier's tongue. You imagine centuries folding, the pact surviving in stories, becoming myths of divine brotherhood, of gods sharing eternal fire. But these weren't parables. They were manuals. The sacred bonds written in legend were once blood temperature maintenance charts. Myths are memory disguised as metaphor. The pact never died. It just changed its vocabulary. Each frozen handclasp found by archaeologists tells the same truth. Death came for all, but together they faced it like a single organism. The line between individual and group dissolved. The ice didn't preserve heroes or leaders. It preserved unity. Against the annihilation of silence, cooperation was rebellion. Sharing was not love. It was resistance strategy. So now you breathe. You, warm and separate, surrounded by walls and comfort. You live in the illusion of independence built by machines. But your ancestors' code still hums beneath your skin. Every time you seek company and fear, warmth and love, rhythm and music, you are honoring their pact. Their blood still circulates through you, whispering ancient mathematics of togetherness. The blood pact of survival was not an age. It was invention born from desperation. It transformed pain into structure, isolation into rhythm, and chaos into harmony. In a world that wanted them cold, they forged heat from each other. You and I exist because they refused to freeze alone. The question that remains is this: have we kept the pact or betrayed it? Imagina esto. 5,000 years later, the mountain exhales again. A glacier fractures under modern boots, and the silence that ruled since before language itself is broken by the sound of human curiosity. Beneath layers of blue glass, a face begins to emerge. Browned, leathery, intact. The eyes are still closed, the lips frozen mid-thought, as if the dead man was mid-sentence when time stopped. The ice didn't bury him. It preserved a message. They call him by names now. The Iceman, the Ancestor, a messenger through millennia. But imagine for a moment that this isn't discovery. It's resurrection. The mountain opening its mouth to release an old truth long denying burial. The body isn't artifact. It's mirror. Every cell an equation to decode the mathematics of survival that made you possible. The first incision cuts through ancient flesh, but what spills isn't decay, it's data. Red blood cells, the oldest ever found, perfectly spherical. DNA like frozen lightning. Scientists huddle over their instruments, and suddenly, ice transforms into scripture. The story written in tissue says more than any language. It reveals adaptation carved in molecules. Evolution as engineering, encrypted in pain. Inside his stomach, traces of ibex meat and wild grains. High-fat content, slow digesting fuels. The same mixture modern athletes emulate for endurance. His last meal wasn't impulse. It was calculation. This was a body tuned for longevity under thermal siege. Every cell had become a miniature furnace, burning protein like coal in a world of zero warmth. His skin tells another story, covered in more than 50 tattoos, placed precisely along joints and meridian lines. Not artwork, medical maps, tiny intersections of pain and healing, primitive acupuncture guided by survival need. The ancients already understood circulation management, how controlled pain redirected blood flow to maintain heat balance. Art as bioengineering. Examine the tools found beside him. A copper axe, a flint dagger, dried fungus line for tinder. No ornamentation, no excess. Every gram of carried weight served a thermodynamic equation. The axe was less a weapon than a heat multiplier. Copper conducting warmth faster for fire initiation. The fungus was fuel that refused to die even when wet. Efficiency distilled into necessity. Yet the most chilling discovery wasn't physical, it was psychological. Forensics showed he died not by exposure, but by violence. An arrow through the shoulder, blade wounds on hand and scalp. The implication, he had killed or been hunted. Even at the apex of engineering, humans remained brutal animals trapped in cold equations. Survival, knowledge, aggression, all one spectrum of adaptation. Think about that contradiction. The same intellect that designed heat-efficient footwear also wielded murder as strategy. The ice remembers both, the perfection of skill and the imperfection of spirit. You can't separate them. They evolved together. Fear and invention are twin flames. Without fear, there is no brilliance. Without danger, no design. When researchers mapped his DNA, they found secrets buried within you too. Traces of immune resistance, genetic toggles designed for Arctic climates, enzymes tailored for high-fat diets. His endurance wasn't myth, it's your inheritance. You don't feel it because civilization softened the edges, replaced glaciers with screens and storms with deadlines. But beneath that comfort, the code still breathes. The adaptation didn't vanish. It sleeps. The discoveries cascade like returning memories. Microscopic particles in his lungs reveal smoke, proof of shared fires. Marks on his bones show load distribution consistent with communal labor. Even cuts on his fingers reveal the architecture of group coordination. It's as if his body was a ledger, recording a civilization not in writing, but in wear and scar. His flesh is the book that refused to burn. When you look at him frozen mid-motion, the scene becomes unbearable, a life paused without conclusion. One instant he's walking through a ridge of mist. The next, eternity closes around him like glass. And yet, something impossible happened. The cold gave him immortality. The glacier turned time into a cocoon instead of a coffin. He outsmarted entropy by surrendering to it. Imagine the irony. What killed millions, this merciless cold, is the reason he still exists. The destroyer became preserver. He cheats death not through power, but through stillness. The great truth of adaptation isn't resistance, it's cooperation. The strongest organism is not the one that fights the environment, but the one that learns to negotiate with it. Through radiographs, scientists see tendons still frozen in tension. His body died alert, not relaxed, caught in a moment of flight. Adrenaline still echoing in molecular form. Even microscopic fractures in his bones retell the story of a chase. You can almost hear it. The crunch of snow, the hiss of breath, the whistling silence before impact. Doesn't narrate, but the ice does. It recorded everything. Now, under the microscope, ancient cells begin to shimmer. Fibers stretch, proteins flicker. Life replays itself at cellular tempo. The data shows stress adaptations beyond what was assumed possible. Heat shock proteins, cryostability, cardiac resilience. The human body learned to dance with death one molecule at a time. The ice mummies aren't fossils. They're living lessons waiting to be read aloud. Compare their design to yours. Pulse the same, metabolism slower, but efficiency unmatched. They generated more internal energy per calorie consumed. Their muscles stored more fat-adapted fuel, optimized for scarcity. Civilization made you faster, but weaker. They were slow, but infinite. The cost of comfort has been your surrender of strength. Deep inside his genetic code lies a whisper about immunity. The early immune system of these people fought pathogens bred in animals and permafrost. The cells that survived became blueprints for endurance beyond temperature. Biological war veterans carrying memory of the cold's bacteria. Their immunity wasn't fragile. It was forged in microbial hell. Every disease was a rehearsal for the next catastrophe. You can't help but wonder, what else did the ice save? Maybe more than flesh. Maybe songs sung to the wind before the storm devoured them. Maybe forgotten languages encoded in rhythm and gesture. Maybe the first moral laws written not on stone, but on cooperation itself. The glacier was their library. The ice their archive of everything human before memory began. Under synthetic light, the mummy's face begins to thaw slightly. Drops form along his cheeks, fall, vanish. The thaw is terrifying, a metaphor for remembrance and decay colliding. Every meltwater droplet carries ancient DNA, ancient information, ancient pain. The more we study him, the more he disappears. Knowledge demands sacrifice, even from the dead. You stand before the display glass centuries later. His outline a silhouette against perfect refrigeration systems humming quietly. Around him, cameras flash, tourists murmur, microphone wires snake under marble floors. Humanity marvels at what it once was, forgetting that it is still that. The distance between you and him is not time. It's memory loss pretending to be progress. 5,000 years, and the same cold that tested him is returning. with new faces, new climates, new extinctions. The cycle restarts, and his frozen stare becomes prophecy. He's not looking back. He's watching forward. The message embedded in his blood isn't nostalgia. It's warning. The ice is melting, and with it, our last memory of precision balance. You can feel that awareness curling around the spine. The adaptation we left behind might be the very thing we need again. Warmth without discipline breeds fragility. Knowledge without humility breeds blindness. The glacier knew balance. It uncovered only those who earned memory through suffering. Forget that equation, and the next freeze won't preserve. It will erase. Look again into those eyes, half closed, but seeing more than life allows. They hold reflection not of death, but of stubborn existence, the refusal to vanish. His body was never meant to be artifact. It was instruction. The mummies are our biographies written before language. They are the reminder that adaptation is willpower carved into matter. Because the truth that chills your veins isn't that they died in the cold. It's that they mastered it. They transformed fear into structure, structure into intelligence, and intelligence into endurance. And their frozen silence is still speaking to you now, across eras, across comfort, through glass and logic. It's asking a question modern humanity refuses to answer. When the next ice returns, and it will you remember what they knew? Will you hear the ancient rhythm inside your blood, the pact between breath and endurance, the architecture of warmth built through unity? The answer isn't written in stone. It's sleeping in your veins, waiting to reawaken the moment the temperature drops again. Maybe what the ice mummies preserved wasn't their bodies. Maybe it was the blueprint for our second beginning.